Swing low, O chariot swinging coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot. Toward the year 1865 brought the promise of freedom, following 4 years of bloody conflict. The Civil War concluded with Union victory during 1865. Throughout the United States, enslaved men and women waited with anxious hearts for the meaning of liberty to reach their towns and homes. In Louisville, Kentucky, the news of abolition stirred both joy and disbelief. Families who had endured separation through auctions and forced labor began dreaming of reunion. Liberty's promise meant more than simply leaving behind chains. It meant building lives anew with dignity, land, and fair wages. Yet in Kentucky, the word freedom rested on fragile ground. Unlike states in the Deep South, slavery had established deep roots across both rural farms and urban households. Louisville's economy depended heavily upon river trade, warehouses, and manufacturing industries where enslaved labor was commonplace. Many African Americans anticipated treatment as free citizens, yet local power structures resisted fiercely. Former slaveholders, stripped of wealth and authority, sought to maintain control through intimidation and manipulation. For the freed population, the war's conclusion marked merely the beginning of another struggle to claim rights existing on paper but unrecognized in daily existence. Louisville's fragile transition. By 1867, Louisville stood as a city defined by contradictions. Its streets hummed with activity as riverboats traversed the Ohio River carrying goods and passengers, while brick warehouses and tobacco factories offered fresh employment opportunities. On its surface, Louisville appeared modern, expanding, and prosperous. Yet beneath this exterior, racial tensions ran deep. The city contained both hope and hostility as thousands of freed individuals attempted to forge futures for themselves. The shift from slavery to freedom remained precarious. White employers frequently refused fair wages or employed debt contracts to bind workers, creating conditions barely distinguishable from enslavement. Police patrols and court systems favored white citizens, seldom extending protection to black families. Accounts of violence against freed men circulated widely, and night riders threatened those bold enough to demand justice. For women like Patty Minkins, who had served in Louisville households during slavery, freedom meant continuing service beneath the same roofs where she had once been regarded as property. Churches and schools began appearing, organized by African American communities determined to rise despite opposition. In basement rooms of wooden chapels or rented downtown halls, reading and writing lessons occurred after nightfall. Louisville's fragile transition revealed both advancement and treachery. While the city presented itself as part of a renewed America, numerous black citizens remained ensnared in old chains disguised beneath new labels. Patty Minkins' early years. Before continuing with our narrative, if you're finding value in this content, please subscribe to the channel to ensure you don't miss upcoming true stories about slavery. Let's proceed. Patty Minkins entered bondage through birth in Louisville, Kentucky during the years preceding the Civil War. Like numerous enslaved children within urban households, her earliest recollections centered around kitchens, laundry rooms, and small servant quarters positioned behind brick homes. Louisville lacked traditional plantation status, yet slavery permeated everything: riverfront docks, tobacco warehouses, and the interiors of wealthy families' residences. Patty likely observed her mother performing endless tasks for white employers, always under close watch. Childhood passed quickly. By the time she could carry buckets or sweep floors, she became integrated into the household labor force. Urban slavery differed from the expansive cotton fields of Mississippi or Alabama. Enslaved women and men in Louisville often resided closer to their enslavers, sleeping in small outbuildings or attic spaces. They cooked, cleaned, tended children, and occasionally worked in local markets, yet received neither wages nor rights. Patty's early existence was molded by silence and obedience enforced through fear of punishment. Still, she undoubtedly discovered moments of connection with other enslaved individuals throughout the city. Shared songs, whispered prayers, and secret gatherings created fragile community bonds. By 1865, when war concluded, Patty remained young yet already carried enslavement's deep scars. For her, freedom's promise appeared close at hand. Yet daily reality's chains remained unbroken. Theoretically, by 1865, slavery had been abolished throughout the United States. The 13th Amendment declared holding people as property illegal. However, in Kentucky, where local laws and traditions continued favoring slaveholders, reality proved far more complicated. For women such as Patty Minkins, freedom's announcement brought no immediate transformation. Instead, she remained within the same household where she had been enslaved, expected to serve as before. Employers and former masters frequently insisted that young black women owed them years of labor, claiming false contracts or apprenticeships never freely agreed upon. Fear and manipulation sustained this illusion of abolition. Many freed individuals lacked literacy, enabling courts and employers to trap them easily within fraudulent agreements. Local sheriffs and judges, who typically sympathized with white property owners, deliberately looked away. Louisville's newspapers reported freedom, yet inside kitchens, stables, and workshops old patterns of domination persisted. For Patty, daily existence following abolition likely appeared nearly identical to life beforehand. She rose early, worked extensive hours, and endured constant oversight. The difference existed only on paper. Freedom lived in law but not in practice. Her circumstances reveal Reconstruction-era Kentucky's painful truth. Liberty was declared, yet justice lingered, leaving Americans trapped in bondage long after the nation celebrated emancipation. Hidden bondage within the city. By 1867, Louisville presented itself as a free city flying the Union flag. However, reality for many African Americans consisted of hidden bondage. While the public celebrated advancement, thousands of freed individuals remained trapped within systems echoing slavery. Women like Patty Minkins, once enslaved in city households, were informed they must continue laboring without compensation. Employers employed deceptive contracts or claimed guardianship over younger black women, forcing them into involuntary service. These arrangements faced rare challenges because Kentucky's courts were dominated by men sympathetic to white property owners. Louisville's urban environment created distinctive forms of control. On busy streets near the Ohio River, black workers transported heavy loads, cleaned taverns, and served food. Yet many never received payment. Instead, they faced threats of jail or violence if they refused. City jails became additional coercion tools. African Americans accused of vagrancy or disobedience faced arrest and subsequent leasing to local businesses, echoing slavery's system in everything but name. For Patty, this meant that even after war's conclusion, she continued living under constant surveillance. Her days overflowed with household labor, caring for children who would eventually inherit wealth built upon her unpaid work. At night, she may have questioned whether freedom had ever truly existed. Hidden bondage ensured that numerous Louisville residents remained chained not by law but by intimidation's power, poverty and injustice, resistance and survival. Despite oppression's crushing weight, African Americans like Patty Minkins discovered ways to resist and survive. Resistance in Louisville did not always manifest as open rebellion. Instead, it took shape through quiet defiance, delaying work, sharing food with neighbors, or secretly teaching one another to read. These daily choices enabled people to preserve dignity within a world determined to strip it away. Patty, like many young women, learned to protect herself through silence before white employers, yet strength within her private community. Survival also depended upon networks of trust. Families separated during slavery worked tirelessly toward reunion. In Louisville, groups of freed people gathered at river docks, hoping to locate loved ones sold south before the war. Churches provided both spiritual and physical sanctuary. Inside wooden chapels, songs of freedom carried messages of endurance. Faith became a powerful weapon against despair. For women like Patty, survival also meant utilizing their skills. Cooking, sewing, and childcare could sometimes be converted into paid work, though employers frequently cheated or underpaid them. Still, every earned coin represented a step toward independence. Resisting did not always yield immediate results, but it preserved hope. By refusing to surrender their humanity, freed people planted seeds for future generations. Patty's survival was not solely her own. It formed part of a larger struggle wherein every act of endurance pushed back against the bondage system that refused to die in post-war Kentucky. Community and church networks. In the years following the Civil War, black churches became survival and resistance hearts within Louisville. For individuals like Patty Minkins, these sacred spaces extended beyond mere worship locations. They functioned as meeting halls, classrooms, and community centers where freed people could gather free from constant white supervision. Churches such as small Baptist and Methodist congregations began appearing in wooden buildings, rented storefronts, and even private residences. Here, African Americans shared news, reunited families, and organized schools for both children and adults. Education stood as a central mission. Volunteers and teachers, sometimes freed individuals themselves or sympathetic Northerners, offered reading and writing lessons. For a woman like Patty, who had grown up in bondage and likely never held a book during childhood, learning letters represented revolution. Literacy meant protection against fraudulent contracts and a tool for navigating a world that had long denied her humanity. These networks also provided emotional strength. In a city where white patrols and employers still controlled daily existence, church gatherings granted African Americans belonging and independence. They sang spirituals carrying slavery's memory and liberation's hope. They pooled resources to help widows purchase land or defend community members in court. For Patty, belonging to this network meant knowing she was not alone. Even if her days overflowed with labor and surveillance, evenings spent among her people provided courage. Churches became symbols of a new future, fragile yet determined, where freedom slowly took root within Louisville's soil. Confrontation with authorities. As freed people in Louisville began organizing and asserting their rights, confrontations with authorities became unavoidable. For women like Patty Minkins, whose very existence challenged the old order, courts and police typically represented danger rather than protection. Judges and sheriffs in Kentucky were almost always white men who sympathized with former slaveholders. When African Americans attempted to challenge illegal bondage, their cases frequently faced dismissal, delay, or reversal. The law was written to promise freedom, yet in practice it was applied unevenly, leaving individuals like Patty with little justice hope. Still, moments occurred when freed people pushed their cases forward. Some men and women testified before local courts, describing how they were forced to work without compensation or held under false contracts. During these rare public hearings, individual courage was remarkable. Standing in a courtroom surrounded by white hostility, they spoke continued slavery's truth. For Patty, even contemplating bringing her situation to court carried immense risk. Speaking out could mean retaliation, eviction, or worse, violent punishment from those determined to silence her. Authorities also controlled freedom through vagrancy laws, which authorized police to arrest African Americans for unemployment or simply walking at night without papers. Those arrested were sent to city jails and subsequently leased to businesses, recreating slavery under another name. This system blurred the line between justice and oppression, ensuring black freedom remained fragile. Patty's story reflects how deeply Reconstruction failed in places like Kentucky, where liberty's promise clashed with the harsh reality of institutions determined to preserve the old order. The weight of silence. For decades following emancipation, the story of individuals like Patty Minkins lay buried beneath silence layers. Louisville, like much of Kentucky, preferred to tell a history version celebrating progress while ignoring bondage's persistence after 1865. Local newspapers rarely reported continued servitude's truth, and white families who had once enslaved people erased these details from their family records. This silence was not accidental. It represented a deliberate choice to protect reputations and maintain the illusion that slavery had ended cleanly with the war. For African Americans, silence often stemmed from necessity rather than denial. Speaking too openly about mistreatment could bring retaliation, employment loss, or violence. Women like Patty, who remained trapped in households after abolition, carried their pain quietly. Their daily survival demanded public obedience, even as they whispered truth among trusted company. Stories of hidden bondage were passed down in fragments. A grandmother telling her granddaughter how she worked without wages, or a neighbor recalling night patrols fear long after the war. This silence shaped memory across generations. Without public acknowledgement, post-war slavery's reality faded from Kentucky's collective history. School books celebrated freedom but omitted struggles of those left behind. Patty's experience reminds us that testimony absence does not mean suffering absence. Her bondage after abolition stands as evidence of how power can erase voices. Breaking that silence today means restoring her story, granting recognition to lives denied justice, and challenging the myths that once concealed their pain. Remembering Patty Minkins. To remember Patty Minkins is to confront one of American history's most difficult truths, that freedom did not arrive simultaneously for all. In Louisville in 1867, she remained in bondage even after the nation had declared slavery abolished. Her life represents the countless unnamed men and women who continued enduring forced labor beneath new disguises. Remembering her today constitutes an act of justice, a way of ensuring her suffering is not forgotten. Her story teaches us that emancipation was not a single event but a prolonged struggle, uneven and often betrayed. For Patty, liberty's promise was delayed by a society unwilling to release its old order. Yet through surviving, through holding on to her dignity, she became part of a broader endurance legacy. Her silence, her labor, her quiet resistance acts carried meaning even when history chose not to record them. Commemorating Patty means granting her voice in places where it was once denied. It means telling her story in classrooms, documentaries, and community gatherings. It means recognizing Louisville not only for its commerce and growth, but also for the hidden chains that bound women like her after the war. Remembering Patty Minkins challenges us to see beyond official timelines, to honor the resilience of those who lived in broken promises' shadow. Her name stands as a reminder that justice delayed is justice denied, and that memory itself can become liberation's form.